The sun hung low over the New Mexico territory, casting long shadows across the dusty plains where Samuel Harrison's ranch stretched as far as the eye could see. His weathered hands gripped the wooden fence post as he watched his prize stallions gallop freely across the open range. Each horse represented years of careful breeding, countless hours of training, and more money than most men would see in a lifetime. Samuel was not like most men. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing more than determination and a handful of wild Mustangs he had captured with his bare hands 20 years ago. The Harrison Ranch was now the largest horse breeding operation in 3 territories, supplying cavalry units, wealthy ranchers, and anyone who could afford his premium livestock. But for all his success, Samuel Harrison was a deeply lonely man. His wife Margaret had died in childbirth 5 years earlier, taking their unborn son with her. Since then, Samuel had thrown himself into his work, expanding his operation and acquiring more land, more horses, more of everything except what his heart truly needed. The big ranch house sat empty except for him and his housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, who worried constantly about his solitary existence. "Senor Harrison," she would say, "a man needs more than horses for company. You should find yourself a good woman, start a family again." Samuel would always change the subject. The truth was he had tried. He had courted several women in the nearby town of Copper Creek, but none of them understood his passion for the land and the animals. They saw only his wealth and wanted to change him to make him into a proper gentleman who would move to a city and live a civilized life. That was not Samuel Harrison. On this particular evening, as Samuel checked on his newest foals, his foreman Jake Martinez approached with an unusual expression on his weathered face. Jake had worked for Samuel for over a decade and had seen almost everything the frontier could throw at a man. "Boss," Jake said, removing his hat and running his fingers through his graying hair, "we got visitors coming up the main road. Apache riders, looks like a delegation of some kind." Samuel straightened up, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt .45 on his hip. Relations with the local Apache tribes had been peaceful for the past few years, but tensions could change quickly on the frontier. How many riders?" "About a dozen, maybe 15. They're flying a white flag and riding slow. Doesn't look like trouble, but you never can tell." Samuel nodded and walked toward the main house to get a better view of the approaching riders. Through his telescope, he could see them clearly now. The lead rider was an older Apache man wearing traditional clothing mixed with some white man's garments. Behind him rode younger warriors, but, as Jake had noted, they carried no weapons in their hands and displayed clear signs of peaceful intent. "Get the men ready, but keep them calm," Samuel instructed Jake, "and ask Mrs. Rodriguez to prepare some food and water for our guests. If they're here to talk, we'll treat them with respect." As the Apache delegation approached the ranch house, Samuel walked out to meet them. He had learned some Apache words over the years and could communicate in basic terms, though he suspected at least some of the visitors would speak English. The lead rider dismounted and approached Samuel with the measured dignity of a man accustomed to leadership. He appeared to be in his 60s, with steel-gray hair braided with leather and beads, and eyes that had seen many seasons of both war and peace. "I am Chief Standing Bearer of the Mesero Apache," the man said in clear but accented English. "You are Samuel Harrison, the horsekeeper." "I am," Samuel replied, extending his hand in greeting. "You're welcome here, Chief Standing Bearer. What brings you to my ranch?" The chief accepted the handshake, studying Samuel's face carefully. "We have watched you for many seasons, horsekeeper. You treat the animals with respect. You do not take more from the land than you give back. This is good." Samuel felt a mixture of pride and curiosity. He had indeed worked hard to maintain his ranch in harmony with the natural environment, partly out of practical necessity and partly because he genuinely loved the land. "I try to be a good neighbor," Samuel said simply. Chief Standing Bear nodded approvingly. "This is why I come to you with a proposition that may sound strange to your ears." The other Apache riders had dismounted and stood quietly behind their leader, their faces serious but not threatening. Samuel gestured toward his house. "Would you like to come inside? Mrs. Rodriguez has prepared refreshments." "We will speak here under the open sky," the chief replied. "What I have to say concerns the earth and all who live upon it." Samuel nodded and waited for the chief to continue. He had learned that Apache culture valued patience, and proper timing in important conversations. My daughter, Chief Standing Bear began, is named Ayana. It means eternal blossom in our language. She is 25 winters old, unmarried, and the most beautiful woman in 3 tribes. Samuel felt a flicker of confusion. Why would the chief be telling him about his daughter? Ayana has been promised in marriage to several great warriors. The chief continued. Each time, she has refused. She says the spirits have shown her that her destiny lies elsewhere, with a man who understands the language of horses. Now Samuel's confusion deepened into something approaching alarm. Surely the chief wasn't suggesting what it seemed he was suggesting. Chief Standing Bear, Samuel said carefully, I'm honored that you would speak of your daughter, but I'm not sure I understand why you're telling me this. The older man's eyes grew more intense. 3 nights ago, Ayana had a vision during the new moon ceremony. She saw herself standing beside a man with hair like wheat and eyes like the sky, surrounded by 1,000 horses running free across the plains. The medicine woman confirmed that this was a true vision sent by the spirits. Samuel's mouth went dry. His hair was indeed the color of wheat, bleached by years under the desert sun, and his eyes were a pale blue that people often remarked upon. The spirits do not lie, Chief Standing Bear continued. My daughter's destiny is connected to yours, horsekeeper. But there is a problem. What kind of problem? Samuel asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. In our tradition, a man who wishes to marry must prove his worth by offering a bride price to the woman's family. Usually, this means horses, weapons, or other valuable goods. But you are not Apache, and my daughter is not an ordinary woman. The chief paused, letting his words sink in before delivering what Samuel would later remember as the most shocking statement he had ever heard. If you wish to spend one night with my daughter as her husband, to see if the spirits truly intend for you to be together, you must offer a bride price that matches her value. Ayana is worth more than all the treasures of our people combined. Samuel waited, his heart beginning to pound. I want 1,000 horses, Chief Standing Bear said quietly. 1,000 of your finest horses, given freely to the Apache people, in exchange for one night with my daughter as your wife. The words hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire. Samuel stared at the chief, certain he must have misheard. 1,000 horses? He repeated slowly. 1,000 horses, the chief confirmed. If, after that one night, you and my daughter find that you're truly meant to be together, then you may court her properly, and we will arrange a marriage according to both our customs. If not, you will have given a great gift to the Apache people, and my daughter will know that she was wrong about her vision. Samuel's mind reeled. 1,000 horses represented nearly half of his entire herd, the work of 2 decades, and a fortune beyond imagining. It would cripple his operation and force him to start over almost from scratch. But as he looked into Chief Standing Bear's eyes, he saw something that gave him pause. This was not a joke or a scheme to rob him. The chief was deadly serious, and there was something else there too, a father's concern for his daughter's happiness, and a leader's responsibility to his people. Chief Standing Bear, Samuel said slowly, may I ask why you believe this arrangement would be acceptable to your daughter, and why you would trust a white man with something so precious to you? The chief's expression softened slightly. You ask good questions, horsekeeper. My daughter has refused every suitor because she says they see only her beauty or her position as the chief's daughter. They do not see her spirit. In her vision, she saw a man who spoke to horses as if they were his brothers, who understood that all living things have value beyond what they can provide. He gestured toward the pastures where Samuel's horses grazed peacefully. We have watched you for many seasons. You do not break horses, you partner with them. You do not exhaust the land, you work with it. This tells us about your character. Samuel felt a strange mixture of honor and terror. And if I refuse? Then you refuse, the chief said simply. We will return to our people, and Ayana will eventually marry someone chosen by the tribal council. But she will always wonder about the vision, and you will continue living alone with only horses for company. The truth of that statement hit Samuel like a physical blow. He looked around at his vast ranch, his beautiful horses, his empty house, and suddenly saw it all through different eyes. What good was all this wealth and success if he had no one to share it with? I need time to consider this, Samuel said. Chief Standing Bear nodded. Of course. But know this, if you agree, the exchange must happen during the next full moon, which comes in 7 days. According to our traditions, that is when the spirits are strongest and most able to guide two people toward their true destiny. The chief remounted his horse with the fluid grace of a man who had been riding since childhood. We will camp by the river 2 miles west of here until the full moon rises. If you decide to accept my proposal, come to our camp with your answer. If you do not come, we will understand and return to our people with no ill will. As the Apache delegation rode away, Samuel stood in his yard feeling as if his entire world had been turned upside down. Jake Martinez approached, his face full of curiosity and concern. "Boss, what do they want?" Samuel looked at his foreman, a man who had been with him through good times and bad, who had helped him build this empire from nothing. How could he explain what had just happened? "They made me an offer, Jake," Samuel said quietly. "The kind of offer that changes everything." That night, Samuel sat on his front porch long after the sun had set, staring out at his horses and trying to make sense of what had happened. Mrs. Rodriguez brought him dinner, but he barely touched it. His mind kept circling around the same impossible questions. Could he really give up half his life's work for one night with a woman he had never met? Was it possible that this Apache maiden had truly seen him in a vision? And, most importantly, what did his heart tell him about this unprecedented opportunity? As the stars emerged in the clear desert sky, Samuel Harrison began to realize that his answer would determine not just his own future, but the future of everyone who depended on him, his workers, his horses, and, perhaps most importantly, a young Apache woman named Ayana who believed that the spirits had shown her the man she was meant to love. The next 7 days would be the longest week of Samuel Harrison's life, as he wrestled with a decision that would either lead to the greatest happiness he had ever known or the most expensive mistake in the history of the American frontier. But deep in his heart, Samuel already knew what his answer would be. The question was whether he had the courage to follow through with it. The morning after Chief Standing Bear's visit dawned cold and clear, but Samuel Harrison felt neither the chill in the air nor noticed the beauty of the sunrise painting the mountains in shades of gold and pink. He had spent the entire night pacing his house, moving from room to room like a caged animal, his mind churning over the impossible proposal. Mrs. Rodriguez found him in his study, slumped in his leather chair with papers scattered across his desk, financial records, breeding charts, correspondence with cavalry officers, and other ranchers who bought his horses. The numbers told the story of his success in stark black ink. 2,100 horses currently on the ranch, with an estimated value of $180,000. A fortune that had taken 20 years to accumulate. "Senor Harrison," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. "You look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" Samuel looked up at her with bloodshot eyes. "Maria, if someone asked you to give up everything you had worked for your entire life, everything that defined who you are, for something that might not even exist, what would you do?" The older woman studied his face with the wisdom of someone who had raised 8 children and buried 2 husbands. "I would ask myself what I was really giving up and what I might really be gaining." "That's not helpful," Samuel said, but there was no anger in his voice, only exhaustion. "See, it is helpful," Maria replied firmly. "You think you would be giving up horses. But horses can be replaced, senor. A good woman, a true partner, children who carry your name. These things cannot be bought with all the horses in the world." Before Samuel could respond, Jake Martinez knocked on the study door. "Boss, we got a problem. Word about yesterday's meeting has spread to town. There's a group of men riding up from Copper Creek, and they don't look happy." Samuel sighed and stood up, strapping on his gun belt. He had been dreading this moment. News traveled fast in the territory, and the idea of a white rancher making deals with Apache chiefs would not sit well with many of his neighbors. The delegation from Copper Creek consisted of 6 men, led by Mayor William Thornton, a pompous businessman who owned the general store and fancied himself a leader of the community. Behind him rode Sheriff Bob Clayton, banker Frank Morrison, and 3 other prominent townsmen, all wearing expressions of concern mixed with indignation. "Samuel," Mayor Thornton called out as they approached, "we need to talk." Samuel walked out to meet them, Jake flanking him on one side. "Morning, gentlemen. What brings you out to my ranch so early?" "You know damn well what brings us here," Sheriff Clayton interjected. "Half the town is talking about Apache chiefs visiting your place yesterday. Some folks are worried you're making deals that could put everyone in danger." Samuel kept his expression neutral. "I had visitors, that's true, We had a peaceful conversation. Nothing more. Nothing more. Mayor Thornton's voice rose. Samuel, these people are savages. They can't be trusted. Whatever they offered you, whatever they want, you need to refuse and send them on their way. Savages. Samuel repeated quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Mayor, in my experience, the Apache people are honorable. They keep their word, they respect the land, and they don't cheat their neighbors in business deals. The implied criticism was not lost on the group. Several of the men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Banker Morrison leaned forward. Samuel, be practical. Your ranch is the biggest employer in this area. If something happens to you, if there's trouble with the Indians, it affects all of us. You have a responsibility to this community. My responsibility, Samuel said firmly, is to run my ranch as I see fit, treat all people with respect, and mind my own business. I suggest you gentlemen do the same. Sheriff Clayton's hand moved slightly toward his gun. Now see here, Harrison, no, you see here, Samuel cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. This is my land bought and paid for. These men came here peacefully, and they'll leave peacefully. What business I conduct with anyone is my affair, not yours. Mayor Thornton tried a different approach. Samuel, think about Margaret. Think about what she would want. Would she want you getting involved with Indians? Would she want you putting yourself in danger? The mention of his dead wife hit Samuel like a physical blow, but it also crystallized his anger. Don't you dare speak about my wife, he said, his voice low and deadly. Margaret cared about treating all people with dignity and respect. She would be ashamed of what you're saying. The confrontation might have escalated, but Jake Martinez stepped forward, his own hand resting casually on his gun butt. Gentlemen, he said politely but firmly, Mr. Harrison has given you his answer. Unless you have ranch business to discuss, I think it's time for you to head back to town. For a moment, tension crackled in the air like electricity before a storm. Then, Mayor Thornton seemed to deflate slightly. Samuel, we're just trying to look out for you. And for the town. If you change your mind, if you need help dealing with the situation, you know where to find us. As the men rode away, Jake turned to Samuel with a concerned expression. Boss, they're going to cause trouble. Maybe get the cavalry involved. You sure you want to go through with whatever this is about? Samuel watched the dust cloud from the departing riders fade in the distance. Jake, how long have you worked for me? 12 years come spring. In all that time, have I ever made a decision based on what other people wanted instead of what I believed was right? Jake grinned. No, sir. You're the most stubborn man I ever met. Then, why would I start now? Samuel clapped his foreman on the shoulder. But I need you to know, this decision affects everyone who works here. Before I do anything, I want to talk to all the men. That afternoon, Samuel gathered his workers in the main barn. There were 23 men in total, cowboys, horse trainers, stable hands, and maintenance workers. Most had been with him for years, and all depended on the ranch for their livelihood. Samuel stood before them, choosing his words carefully. Men, I'm sure you've heard that I had Apache visitors yesterday. I want you to hear the truth from me before rumors get out of hand. He told them about Chief Standing Bear's proposal, omitting some of the more personal details, but making it clear that accepting would mean giving away nearly half the horse herd. The reaction was mixed. Some of the younger men looked excited by the adventure of it all, while the older, more experienced hands appeared concerned about the practical implications. Tom Patterson, the head horse trainer who had been with Samuel since the early days, spoke up first. Boss, I've seen you make some bold moves over the years, but this is something else entirely. You sure this Apache girl is worth bankrupting yourself over? I don't know, Tom, Samuel said honestly. I've never met her, but I do know that I've been living half a life since Margaret died. Maybe it's time to take a chance on something that could change everything. Young Billy Martinez, Jake's nephew, raised his hand. Mr. Harrison, what happens to us if you go through with this? Will there still be jobs? Samuel had been dreading this question. I'll be honest with you boys. If I give away 1,000 horses, we'll have to cut back operations significantly. Some of you might have to find work elsewhere, at least temporarily. But I promise you this. I'll give every man who wants to stay a chance to rebuild with me. An older cowboy named Red Jameson, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. Mr. Harrison, I've been working ranches for 30 years. I've seen men make all kinds of crazy decisions for all kinds of reasons. Most of them ended badly. He paused, studying Samuel's face. But I've also seen what happens to a man when he gives up on finding happiness. That ends badly too. A murmur of agreement went through the group. "What are you saying, Red?" Samuel asked. "I'm saying maybe it's time for you to stop thinking like a businessman and start thinking like a man who deserves to be happy. We'll figure out the rest as we go." The meeting ended with most of the men expressing cautious support for whatever Samuel decided to do. But Samuel could see the worry in their eyes, and it added another layer of weight to his already heavy decision. That evening, Samuel rode out alone to the river where the Apache delegation was camped. He didn't approach close enough to be seen, but he could make out their fires and hear the faint sound of voices carried on the wind. Somewhere in that camp was the woman who had seen him in a vision, who believed that their destinies were intertwined. As he sat on his horse in the gathering darkness, Samuel found himself thinking about his conversation with Chief Standing Bear. The Apache leader had spoken of his daughter with such obvious love and pride, but also with a sadness that suggested he knew he might be saying goodbye to her forever. What kind of man would risk his daughter's happiness on a stranger's character? And what kind of woman would refuse marriage to proven warriors in favor of a vision about a man she had never met? Samuel was still pondering these questions when he heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. He turned to see a single rider coming toward him through the moonlight. As the figure drew closer, Samuel realized it was an Apache woman, riding bareback on a paint horse with the fluid grace of someone born to the saddle. She stopped about 20 feet away, and for a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the distance. Even in the dim light, Samuel could see that she was beautiful, but it was a beauty that seemed to come from some inner fire rather than mere physical features. "You are the horse keeper," she said in English that was accented but clear. "I am," Samuel replied, his heart hammering against his ribs. "And you must be Ayana." "I am." She guided her horse a few steps closer. "I came to see if you were real or if my vision was false." Samuel swallowed hard. "What do you see?" Ayana was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the moonlight. "I see a man who carries great sadness, but also great strength. I see someone who understands that true wealth comes from connections with other living beings, not from possessing things." "And is that the man from your vision?" "Yes," she said softly. "But visions show only possibilities, not certainties. The spirits can show us a path, but we must choose whether to walk it." Samuel found himself leaning forward in his saddle, drawn by something in her voice, a quality of deep understanding that seemed far beyond her years. "May I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Why did you refuse the other men who wanted to marry you?" "Your father said they were great warriors." Ayana's smile was barely visible in the darkness, but he could hear it in her voice. They were indeed great warriors. Brave, strong, skilled in battle. But when I spoke with them, I saw that they wanted to possess me, like a beautiful horse or a fine weapon. They saw only what I could give them, not who I truly am. And you think I'm different? "I think," Ayana said slowly, "that you understand the difference between partnership and possession. I have watched you with your horses from a distance. You do not break their spirits. You earn their trust." The simple wisdom of her words struck Samuel like a revelation. She was right about his relationship with horses, and she was right about the other men who had courted her. But was she right about him? "Ayana," he said carefully, "your father's proposal, 1,000 horses for one night. It's not just about money. It's about trust, isn't it?" "Yes," she replied. "My father is testing whether you value connection more than possession. A man who would give up half his wealth for the chance to know one woman's heart. Such a man might be worthy of that heart. And if I choose not to accept, then you choose not to accept," she said simply. "I will honor my father's decision and marry whomever the council selects. But I will always wonder what might have been." As she prepared to ride away, Ayana turned back once more. "Horsekeeper, know this. If you do come to our camp in 3 days, you will not just be buying a night with the chief's daughter. You will be taking the first step on a path that leads either to the greatest joy or the deepest sorrow of your life. There is no middle ground." With that, she wheeled her horse around and rode back toward the Apache camp, leaving Samuel alone under the stars with his thoughts and the echo of her words. 3 days. He had 3 days to decide whether to risk everything he had built for the possibility of everything he had lost when Margaret died. As Samuel rode slowly back to his ranch, he realized that his decision was no longer about horses or money or even about Ayana herself. It was about whether he had the courage to believe that some things in life were worth any price, and whether he was ready to bet his future on the hope that love could indeed conquer all. The next 3 days would test not just Samuel's resolve, but his faith in the possibility that two people from different worlds could find in each other what they had been searching for all their lives. The 3 days following Samuel's midnight encounter with Ayanna passed like a fever dream. Word of the proposed arrangement had somehow leaked beyond Copper Creek, and by the second day, reporters from newspapers in Santa Fe and Albuquerque had arrived to document what they were calling the most extraordinary courtship in the history of the American frontier. Samuel tried to ignore the circus atmosphere that had developed around his ranch, but it became impossible when a photographer from Harper's Weekly set up equipment in the road leading to his property, hoping to capture images of either the Apache delegation or Samuel himself. "This is getting out of hand," Jake Martinez said as they watched another buggy full of curiosity seekers drive slowly past the ranch entrance. "Maybe we should post guards, keep these people away." Samuel shook his head. "Let them look. In 3 days, it won't matter what anyone thinks except me, Ayanna, and Chief Standing Bear." But the external pressure was nothing compared to the internal struggle Samuel faced each time he walked through his stables and corrals. Every horse represented not just financial investment, but memories, relationships, and years of careful breeding work. To give away 1,000 of them felt like giving away pieces of his soul. The decision became even more complicated when a telegram arrived from Colonel James Mitchell, commander of Fort Stanton, the nearest cavalry post. "Mr. Harrison," the telegram read, "have heard reports of proposed transaction with Apache delegation. As major supplier to territorial cavalry, your actions could affect military operations. Request immediate meeting to discuss situation. Arriving tomorrow with escort. Colonel Mitchell." Samuel crumpled the telegram and tossed it into the fireplace. The last thing he needed was military interference in what was already an impossible decision. That evening, as Samuel sat in his study trying to review ranch accounts, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on his door with a visitor he had not expected, Father Miguel Santos from the Catholic Church in Copper Creek. "Father," Samuel said, rising from his chair, "this is a surprise." The elderly priest, a small man with kind eyes and hands worn from years of manual labor before entering the priesthood, smiled gently. "Samuel, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I felt called to speak with you before you make your final decision." Samuel gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Though I should warn you, if you're here to tell me this arrangement is immoral, you're wasting your time." Father Santos chuckled. "My son, I've been a priest for 43 years. I have seen every form of human folly and wisdom imaginable. What you're contemplating may be unusual, but is not immoral." This was not what Samuel had expected to hear. "Then, why are you here?" "To talk about love," the priest said simply, "and about the difference between love and loneliness." Samuel felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "Father, I love my wife deeply. When she died, I thought I would never feel that way about anyone again. And now I don't know what I feel. I met this woman for 5 minutes in the moonlight, and she spoke to me like she had known me all her life. She saw things about me that I barely understand myself." Father Santos nodded thoughtfully. "Samuel, in my years as a priest, I have married many couples. Some married for practical reasons, land, money, family alliances. Others married for passion that burned hot but quickly faded. But the couples who found lasting happiness were those who recognized in each other a spiritual connection that transcended the physical world. Are you saying you think I should go through with this?" "I am saying," the priest replied carefully, "that from what I have heard, this young woman and her father are not asking you to buy a bride. They are asking you to demonstrate that you value the possibility of true connection more than material wealth. That, my son, is not so different from what Christ asked of the rich young man who came to him seeking eternal life." Samuel stared at the priest. "You're comparing my situation to Scripture?" Father Santos smiled. "Scripture is full of stories about people who had to choose between what they possessed and what they truly needed. The question is not whether you can afford to give up 1,000 horses, Samuel. The question is whether you can afford not to." After the priest left, Samuel walked out to his pastures under the star-filled sky. His horses moved like shadows in the darkness, peaceful and content. He had built all of this from nothing, had poured his life into creating something beautiful and lasting. But as he stood there among his life's work, Samuel realized that Father Santos was right. For the past 5 years, He had been trying to fill the emptiness in his heart with more horses, more land, more success. It hadn't worked. He was still alone, still incomplete, still searching for something that couldn't be bought or bred or built. The next morning brought Colonel Mitchell and his escort, exactly as promised. The colonel was a career military man in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He rode directly to Samuel's house with 2 lieutenants and a sergeant, all in full dress uniform. "Mr. Harrison," the colonel said without preamble, "I understand you're considering a transaction that could severely impact your horse breeding operation." "Good morning, Colonel," Samuel replied evenly. "Yes, I'm considering it, but I'm not sure how that affects military operations." Colonel Mitchell dismounted and approached Samuel with the bearing of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Harrison, your ranch supplies 60% of the cavalry mounts for 3 territorial forts. If you suddenly reduce your herd by half, it could leave us critically short of horses, just as we're dealing with increased Apache activity in other areas." Samuel felt a flash of anger. "Colonel, with respect, the Apache delegation camped near my ranch is peaceful. They're not part of any military problem you might be having elsewhere." "Maybe not," the colonel conceded, "but the precedent you're setting is dangerous. If word spreads that white ranchers are making deals with Apache chiefs, it could encourage other tribes to make similar demands. Or," Samuel said pointedly, "it could encourage peaceful relationships based on mutual respect instead of mutual suspicion." The colonel's expression hardened. "Mr. Harrison, I'm not here to debate Indian policy with you. I'm here to point out that your business decisions have consequences beyond your own ranch. The territorial governor is watching this situation very carefully." The implied threat was not lost on Samuel. "Are you saying I'm not free to conduct my business as I see fit?" "I'm saying that if your actions threaten territorial security, the government has the authority to take appropriate measures." After the military delegation left, Samuel felt more conflicted than ever. He was caught between external pressures from the town, the territory, and the military on one side, and his growing conviction that this might be his only chance at real happiness on the other. That evening, 2 days before the full moon deadline, Samuel made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of agonizing over the choice alone, he would visit Chief Standing Bear and ask the questions that had been burning in his mind since their first meeting. He rode to the Apache camp just as the sun was setting, announcing his approach from a distance, so as not to be mistaken for a threat. Chief Standing Bear emerged from his lodge to greet him, his expression unreadable. "Horsekeeper," the chief said, "you come early. The full moon is not until tomorrow night." "I know," Samuel replied, dismounting from his horse. "I came to ask you some questions before I make my final decision." "Speak." Samuel took a deep breath. "Chief Standing Bear, why are you really doing this? 1,000 horses is a fortune. You could ask for money, weapons, land, anything. Why horses?" The chief gestured for Samuel to sit beside a small fire that had been built outside his lodge. "You asked a good question. The answer has to do with how my people see the world." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "To your people, horses are property. They can be bought, sold, traded like any other possession. But to the Apache, horses are partners. They carry us in battle, help us hunt, share our lives. A man's relationship with his horses tells us everything we need to know about his character." Samuel nodded, beginning to understand. "When I ask you for 1,000 horses," the chief continued, "I am asking you to demonstrate that you understand this difference. A man who would give away his horses for the chance to know my daughter's heart. Such a man sees horses as I do, as living beings deserving of respect, not mere possessions. And if I pass this test, if Iona and I find that we're truly compatible, what then?" Chief Standing Bear stared into the fire for a long moment. "Then you will face a choice even more difficult than the one you face now." "What do you mean?" "Iona is Apache. You are white. If you marry her, she can never fully return to our world, and you can never fully enter it. Your children will belong to both worlds, and neither. Are you prepared for that burden?" The question hit Samuel like a physical blow. He had been so focused on the immediate challenge of 1,000 horses that he hadn't fully considered the long-term implications of an interracial marriage in 1885. "I won't lie to you," Samuel said slowly. "I hadn't thought that far ahead." "Good," the chief said, surprising him. "Honesty is always better than false promises. But know this, my daughter has thought of little else since her vision. She understands what she would be choosing. Just then, Ayana emerged from her father's lodge. In the firelight, Samuel could see her clearly for the first time, and his breath caught in his throat. She was indeed beautiful, but it was her eyes that captured him, dark, intelligent, and filled with a depth of understanding that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Father," she said respectfully, "may I speak with the horse keeper?" Chief Standing Bear nodded and rose from his place by the fire. "I will leave you to talk. The moon rises late tonight, so you have time." As her father disappeared into the lodge, Ayana took his place beside the fire. For several minutes, she and Samuel sat in comfortable silence, both staring into the flames. Finally, Ayana spoke. "You have questions for me as well." It wasn't a question, but a statement, and Samuel marveled again at her perceptiveness. "I do," he admitted. "Ayana, if we go through with this arrangement, if we spend one night together and discover that we want to build a life together, are you prepared for what that would mean? The prejudice, the isolation, the difficulties our children would face." Ayana turned to look directly at him, and Samuel felt as if she could see straight through to his soul. "Horsekeeper," she said softly, "I have lived my entire life as the daughter of a chief, expected to marry for political advantage and bear children who would strengthen tribal alliances. I have watched other women in my position marry good men who never saw them as anything more than beautiful objects to be possessed." She paused, her eyes never leaving his face. "In my vision, I saw a man who would see me as a partner, not a possession, who would value my thoughts as much as my beauty, my spirit as much as my body. If that man exists, then no amount of prejudice or hardship would be too great a price to pay for such a love." Samuel felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of fear and uncertainty that had been growing there for days. "And if he doesn't exist?" he asked quietly. "If I'm not the man from your vision?" Ayana smiled, and Samuel felt his heart skip a beat. "Then I will know that the spirits were teaching me to value myself more highly, and I will wait for the right man to come along, even if it takes the rest of my life." As Samuel rode back to his ranch that night, he carried with him the memory of Ayana's smile and the echo of her words. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something stirring in his heart that he had thought was gone forever. Hope. Tomorrow night, when the full moon rose over the New Mexico territory, Samuel Harrison would give his answer to Chief Standing Bear. But deep in his heart, he already knew what that answer would be. The only question now was whether he had the courage to follow through with the most important decision of his life. The day of the full moon dawned clear and bright, but Samuel Harrison felt as if he were moving through a dream. He had made his decision during the long, sleepless hours before dawn, and now everything seemed to take on an unreal quality as he prepared for the most extraordinary gamble of his life. Mrs. Rodriguez had been bustling around the house since before sunrise, cleaning and preparing as if royalty were coming to visit. She had said little about Samuel's decision, but her actions spoke volumes about her support for what he was about to do. "Senor Harrison," she said as she placed his breakfast on the table, "I have prepared the guest room. Fresh linens, flowers from my garden, everything perfect." Samuel looked up from the coffee he had been staring into without drinking. "Maria, you don't have to do all this. The arrangement is for one night only." Mrs. Rodriguez fixed him with a stern look that reminded Samuel why her 8 children had all grown up to be model citizens. "Senor, when a man brings a woman to his home, even for one night, she should feel welcomed and honored. This is not negotiable." Despite his nervousness, Samuel found himself smiling. "Yes, ma'am." The morning brought an endless stream of visitors, each with their own opinion about what Samuel was planning to do. Some came to offer support, others to express concern, and a few to try one last time to talk him out of what they considered madness. Tom Patterson, his head trainer, arrived early with a detailed report on which horses Samuel should keep if he were determined to go through with the trade. "Boss," Tom said, spreading papers across Samuel's desk, "I've been thinking about this all night. If you're really going to give away 1,000 head, we need to be smart about it. Keep the breeding stallions, the pregnant mares, and the youngest stock. Let them have the older horses and the ones with minor injuries." Samuel studied the list Tom had prepared, impressed by the thoroughness of the work. "Tom, that's good thinking, but it doesn't feel right. Chief Standing Bear asked for my finest horses. If I give him anything less than my best, I'm not fulfilling the spirit of the agreement." Tom looked at him, as if he had lost his mind. Boss, we're talking about your life's work here. You don't have to bankrupt yourself to prove a point. Yes, Samuel said quietly, I do. Around noon, a buggy arrived carrying an unexpected visitor. Samuel's sister Elizabeth and her husband Frank, who had traveled from Denver upon receiving a frantic telegram from someone in Copper Creek. Elizabeth Harrison Miller was 3 years older than Samuel and had always considered herself the sensible one in the family. She marched into Samuel's house with the determination of a woman on a mission. Samuel Harrison, she said without preamble, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Samuel sighed and gestured for his sister and brother-in-law to sit down. Hello, Elizabeth. Frank, I assume you've heard about my situation. Heard about it? Elizabeth's voice rose an octave. Samuel, the story is in newspapers from here to Chicago. People are calling you everything from a romantic hero to a complete lunatic. Frank Miller, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless he had something important to say, leaned forward in his chair. Samuel, Elizabeth, and I have talked about this during the whole train ride down here. We're not here to judge you or talk you out of anything. We're here because you're family, and we want to understand what you're really doing. Samuel felt a wave of gratitude toward his brother-in-law. Frank, I'm not sure I understand it myself. All I know is that I've been half alive since Margaret died, and this woman, this Apache woman, she makes me feel like I might be whole again. Elizabeth's expression softened. Oh, Samuel, I know how much you love Margaret. We all did, but throwing away everything you've built won't bring her back. I'm not trying to bring her back, Samuel said. I'm trying to live again. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jake Martinez, who knocked urgently on the door. Boss, Jake said, you need to see this. There's a crowd gathering on the road, and some of them don't look friendly. Samuel walked out onto his front porch and saw what Jake meant. At least 50 people had gathered near his ranch entrance, some on horseback, others in buggies and on foot. Many carried signs with messages like, no deals with savages and protect white women. Damn, Samuel muttered. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Sheriff Clayton rode up to the house, his face grim. Samuel, you need to call this whole thing off. That crowd is getting worked up, and I'm not sure I can control them if things get ugly. Samuel studied the crowd, recognizing many faces from town. These weren't strangers or troublemakers. They were his neighbors, people he had done business with for years. Sheriff, Samuel said carefully, are they threatening violence? Not yet, but emotions are running high. Some folks think you're setting a dangerous precedent, encouraging Indian raids and kidnappings. Others think you're crazy to give away a fortune for one night with a woman. Samuel felt a surge of anger. Sheriff, what I do with my own property is my business. If those people want to make speeches and wave signs, that's their right. But if they try to interfere with a peaceful transaction between me and Chief Standing Bear, I'll defend my property. As if summoned by Samuel's words, a delegation from the crowd began walking toward the house. Leading them was Mayor Thornton, accompanied by several other prominent townsmen and, to Samuel's surprise, 2 women, Mrs. Catherine Whitman, the preacher's wife, and Miss Sarah Collins, the schoolteacher. Samuel, Mayor Thornton called out when they reached the porch. We've come to make one final appeal to your common sense. Samuel crossed his arms and waited. Mrs. Whitman stepped forward. Mr. Harrison, as a Christian woman, I feel compelled to speak out against this immoral arrangement. What you're proposing is little better than prostitution, and it dishonors the memory of your dear wife. The accusation hit Samuel like a slap, but before he could respond, Miss Collins spoke up. Catherine, that's enough, the schoolteacher said firmly. Mr. Harrison, I've taught Apache children in my classroom. I know that their marriage customs are different from ours, but they're not immoral. If Chief Standing Bear has offered his daughter in an honorable arrangement, then it should be treated with respect. Mrs. Whitman turned on the younger woman. Sarah Collins, I'm shocked at you. Encouraging this sinful behavior. What's sinful, Miss Collins interrupted, is the prejudice and hatred I'm hearing from people who claim to follow Christ's teachings about love and acceptance. The argument might have escalated, but it was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A group of Apache riders was approaching from the direction of their camp, led by Chief Standing Bear himself. The crowd on the road began to buzz with nervous energy as the Apache delegation rode past them without acknowledgement and directly to Samuel's house. Chief Standing Bear dismounted and approached the porch, his expression unreadable. Horsekeeper, The chief said formally. The full moon rises in 3 hours. Have you made your decision? Samuel looked around at the circle of faces watching him. His sister, his workers, the townspeople, the Apache riders. Every person present had an opinion about what he should do, but, in the end, only one opinion mattered. I have, Samuel said clearly, his voice carrying to everyone present. Chief Standing Bear, I accept your proposal. I will give you 1,000 of my finest horses in exchange for one night with your daughter as my wife. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Mrs. Whitman swooned and had to be supported by Mayor Thornton. Several men in the crowd began shouting protests, but Sheriff Clayton raised his hand for silence. Chief Standing Bear studied Samuel's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. It is good. The spirits have guided you to the right choice. Wait just a minute, Mayor Thornton sputtered. Samuel, you can't be serious about this. Samuel turned to face the crowd. Mayor, I am completely serious. I'm going to select 1,000 horses from my herd and give them to Chief Standing Bear's people. Then, I'm going to spend one night with his daughter, with all the respect and honor due to a chief's daughter and a woman who may become my wife. And if we try to stop you, called out someone from the crowd. Samuel's hand moved to rest on his gun butt. Then you'll be trespassing on my property and interfering with a lawful business transaction. I wouldn't recommend it. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, Samuel thought there might indeed be violence. Then, Sheriff Clayton stepped forward. All right, folks, the sheriff said loudly, show's over. Mr. Harrison has made his choice, and it's a legal one, even if some of us think it's crazy. Everyone needs to clear out now and let these people conduct their business in peace. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse. As they left, Samuel heard fragments of conversation, some supportive, others critical, all filled with amazement at what they had witnessed. When the last of the townspeople had departed, Chief Standing Bear approached Samuel again. Horsekeeper, the chief said quietly, you have shown great courage today, but the hardest part is still ahead of you. What do you mean? Tonight you will discover whether your heart was right to take this gamble. Tomorrow, you will discover whether the world will let you keep what your heart has found. As the afternoon wore on, Samuel worked with Tom Patterson and the other ranch hands to select the 1,000 horses that would fulfill his bargain. They chose carefully, the finest specimens from every category, horses that represented the best of Samuel's breeding program. Each horse selected felt like giving away a piece of himself, but Samuel was surprised to find that the pain was mixed with something else, anticipation. For the first time in years, he was moving towards something instead of just preserving what he already had. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Samuel prepared for the most important evening of his life. He bathed, shaved, and dressed in his finest clothes, not for vanity, but out of respect for the solemnity of the occasion. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at his bedroom door as he was adjusting his tie. She carried a small wooden box that Samuel had never seen before. Senor Harrison, she said softly, this belonged to my first husband. May he rest in peace. He wore it on our wedding day. She opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small turquoise stone. Maria, Samuel said, deeply moved, I can't take your husband's ring. See, you can, she said firmly. Miguel would be happy to know it was used for love again. Besides, if you marry this woman, you will need something to give her as a token of your commitment. Samuel accepted the ring with gratitude, tucking the box into his jacket pocket. As he walked toward the door, Mrs. Rodriguez caught his arm. Senor, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, be happy. You deserve happiness. The full moon was just beginning to rise as Samuel walked out to meet Chief Standing Bear and Ayanna. The Apache delegation had assembled in front of his house, and the selected horses had been gathered in a large corral nearby. Samuel's breath caught as he saw Ayanna clearly for the first time in full daylight. She wore a traditional Apache dress of white deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and her long black hair was braided with feathers and silver ornaments. She was, without question, the most beautiful woman Samuel had ever seen. But it was not her beauty that made his heart race. It was the way she looked at him with eyes that seemed to see straight to his soul and like what they found there. Chief Standing Bear stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of ancient tradition. Horsekeeper, you have fulfilled your part of the bargain. 1,000 horses, given freely as promised. Samuel nodded. They are yours, Chief Standing Bear. I give them with respect for your people and hope for the future. Then the chief said solemnly, I give you my daughter Iana for one night, to be your wife in all ways according to both our customs and yours. What passes between you in the hours until dawn will determine both your destinies. Iana stepped forward and placed her hand in Samuel's. At the touch of her skin, Samuel felt something electric pass between them. Not just physical attraction, but a sense of recognition that went deeper than the physical world. Are you ready, horsekeeper? She asked softly. Samuel looked into her eyes and saw his future there. Uncertain, challenging, but full of possibilities he had thought were lost to him forever. I'm ready, he said. Together, they walked toward the house as the full moon rose over the New Mexico territory, casting everything in silver light. Behind them, Chief Standing Bear began a traditional chant in the Apache language, blessing their union and asking the spirits to guide them toward their true destiny. Whatever happened in the hours until dawn, Samuel knew that his life had already changed forever. He had gambled everything on the possibility of love, and now he was about to discover whether his bet would pay off or leave him with nothing but memories and regret. But as Iana's hand squeezed as gently, Samuel felt a peace he hadn't known in years. Whatever the outcome, he had chosen to live again rather than merely exist, and that choice alone felt like a victory. The night passed like a sacred ceremony, marked not by the desperate passion Samuel had feared, but by a connection that transcended the physical world. As the moon tracked across the star-filled sky, Samuel and Iana talked through the hours of darkness, sharing stories, dreams, fears, and hopes that neither had ever spoken aloud to another soul. They spoke of Margaret, and Samuel was amazed to find that Iana understood his grief without jealousy, seeing his capacity for deep love as a gift rather than a burden. Iana told him of her mother, who had died when she was 12, and how the loss had shaped her understanding of life's precious fragility. They talked about horses, and Samuel discovered that Iana's knowledge rivaled his own. She had been raised around the animals, had helped with difficult births, and understood their psychology in ways that went beyond mere training. Among my people, she said as they sat by the fireplace in Samuel's living room, we believe horses choose their riders as much as riders choose horses. The best partnerships happen when both beings recognize something in each other that they need. Samuel studied her face in the firelight. Is that what happened to us? Did we choose each other? Iana smiled, and Samuel felt his heart skip the same beat it had the first time he saw that smile. I think, horsekeeper, that we recognized each other. My vision showed me a man, but it could not show me the kindness in your voice or the gentleness in your touch. Those things I had to discover for myself. As dawn approached, they both knew that their night together was ending, but neither felt the sadness that might have been expected. Instead, there was a sense of completion, as if they had found the missing pieces of themselves in each other. When the first rays of sunlight began to creep through the windows, Iana rose from her place beside Samuel on the sofa. The night is ending, horsekeeper. Soon my father will come, and we must give him our answer. Samuel stood as well, taking her hands in his. Iana, I need you to know something. Before last night, I thought I understood what love was. But what I felt for Margaret, as deep as it was the love of a young man who didn't know himself. What I feel for you is different. It's the love of a man who has lost everything and found something worth rebuilding for. Tears gathered in Iana's dark eyes. And I need you to know that in my vision, I saw a man who would complete me. But the spirits did not tell me that I would complete him as well. That is a gift I did not dare hope for. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their moment. Through the window, they could see Chief Standing Bear and several Apache riders approaching the house, just as the sun crested the horizon. Samuel and Iana walked out to meet them together, their hands clasped. Chief Standing Bear dismounted and approached them with an expression that revealed nothing of his thoughts. My daughter, the chief said formally, the night has passed. What you learned? Iana stepped forward, but kept hold of Samuel's hand. Father, I have learned that the spirit spoke truth in my vision. This man sees me not as a possession to be owned, but as a partner to be cherished. His heart is large enough to hold love for the past and hope for the future. Chief Standing Bear turned to Samuel. And you, horsekeeper? What have you learned? Samuel felt the weight of the moment, understanding that his next words would determine not just his own future, but the future of the woman he had come to love more deeply in one night than he had thought possible. Chief Standing Bear, Samuel said clearly, I have learned that your daughter is not just beautiful and wise, but that she has a spirit that matches mine in ways I never expected. If she will have me, and if you will give your blessing, I would like to ask for her hand in marriage. A murmur went through the Apache riders, but Chief Standing Bear's expression remained unreadable. For a long moment, he studied both Samuel and Ayanna as if reading their souls. Finally, the old chief smiled. Horsekeeper, you have proven yourself worthy of my daughter. But now you must prove yourself worthy of the challenges that lie ahead. What do you mean? Chief Standing Bear gestured toward the road leading to Samuel's ranch. In the distance, they could see dust cloud from multiple riders approaching at speed. The cavalry comes, the chief said simply. Colonel Mitchell did not accept your decision as final. He brings soldiers to prevent what he sees as a dangerous alliance. Samuel felt his heart sink. He had known this might happen, but he had hoped they would have more time. Chief, Samuel said urgently, take your people and leave. I'll deal with the military. No, Ayanna said firmly. If we're to be married, then we face this together. I will not start our life by running from the first challenge. Chief Standing Bear nodded approvingly. My daughter speaks wisdom. But horsekeeper, you must understand. If you marry Ayanna, you will be choosing a life between two worlds belonging fully to neither. Are you prepared for that burden? Before Samuel could answer, the cavalry detachment arrived in a thunder of hoofbeats and dust. Colonel Mitchell rode at their head, followed by 24 soldiers in full battle gear. The colonel dismounted and approached with his hand resting on his saber hilt. Mr. Harrison, by the authority of the territorial government, I'm here to put a stop to this illegal arrangement. Samuel stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and Ayanna. Colonel, there's nothing illegal about my arrangement with Chief Standing Bear. I traded horses for the right to court his daughter. That's a business transaction, not a military matter. The territorial governor disagrees, Colonel Mitchell replied coldly. This kind of arrangement sets a dangerous precedent and threatens the stability of our relations with the Indian tribes. Chief Standing Bear spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had led his people through decades of war and peace. Colonel Mitchell, my people have been at peace with the white settlers for 3 years. This arrangement threatens no one. That's not for you to decide, Chief, the colonel snapped. I'm ordering you to take your people back to your reservation immediately. And I'm ordering Mr. Harrison to cease all contact with Apache individuals. Samuel felt anger building in his chest. Colonel, you have no authority over my personal relationships or my business dealings. I have the authority to maintain territorial security, Colonel Mitchell replied. And I'm prepared to use it. The tension in the air was electric as both sides faced off. Samuel could see his ranch hands gathering near the house, armed and ready to support him. The Apache riders sat motionless on their horses, awaiting Chief Standing Bear's command. It was Ayanna who broke the stalemate. She stepped forward, her chin raised with royal dignity. Colonel Mitchell, she said in perfect English, I am Ayanna, daughter of Chief Standing Bear. I speak for myself, not for my father or my tribe. The colonel looked surprised to hear such articulate English from an Apache woman. Miss Ayanna, this arrangement your father has made is not in your best interests. With respect, Colonel, Ayanna replied, her voice steady and strong. You do not know what my best interests are. I am an educated woman. I speak 3 languages I can read and write, and I understand both Apache and American law. I have chosen to marry Samuel Harrison of my own free will. But the precedent, the colonel began. The precedent, Ayanna interrupted, is that 2 people from different cultures can find love and respect for each other. If that threatens your idea of territorial security, then perhaps your idea needs to be reconsidered. Samuel felt a surge of pride and love for this remarkable woman who was defending their right to be together with such eloquence and courage. Colonel Mitchell seemed taken aback by Ayanna's articulate response. He turned back to Samuel. Mr. Harrison, even if I accept that this arrangement is legal, which I don't, you must understand the practical difficulties. Mixed marriages are not accepted in most communities. Your business will suffer, your social standing will be destroyed. Colonel, Samuel said quietly, 5 years ago, I lost the woman I loved and the family we were building together. For 5 years, I've been living half a life, measuring success by the number of horses I owned instead of the quality of relationships I maintained. He paused, looking at Ayana with love shining in his eyes. This woman has shown me what I was missing. If the price of love is the loss of social standing and business contacts, then it's a price I'm willing to pay. The standoff continued for several more tense minutes, until an unexpected voice spoke up from behind the cavalry detachment. Colonel Mitchell, I think you can stand down your man. Everyone turned to see Sheriff Clayton approaching on horseback, followed by Mayor Thornton, Father Santos, and several other townspeople. The colonel looked annoyed. Sheriff, this is a military matter. No, Colonel, it's not, Sheriff Clayton replied firmly. I've been to town this morning, and I've spoken with the territorial attorney. Mr. Harrison's arrangement with Chief Standing Bear is completely legal. He's free to marry whomever he chooses, and Chief Standing Bear is free to give his blessing to the union. Mayor Thornton stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. Samuel, I owe you an apology. I spoke out of fear and prejudice yesterday, not wisdom. If you're determined to go through with this marriage, you have my support. Father Santos approached Ayana and Samuel with a warm smile. My children, if you would like to be married in the Catholic Church, I would be honored to perform the ceremony. Samuel felt a wave of gratitude toward these people who had chosen to support him despite their earlier opposition. But it was Chief Standing Bear who provided the final resolution to the crisis. Colonel Mitchell, the chief said with quiet dignity, my daughter will marry the horsekeeper with or without your approval. The only question is whether this marriage will be celebrated as the beginning of greater understanding between our peoples, or whether it will be opposed by those who prefer conflict to peace. The colonel looked around at the faces surrounding him, Apache warriors, cavalry soldiers, townspeople, and ranch hands, all watching to see what he would do. Finally, his shoulders sagged slightly in defeat. Very well, Colonel Mitchell said stiffly. But understand this, Mr. Harrison. If this marriage causes any increase in Apache unrest, you'll be held responsible. Colonel, Samuel replied, this marriage will cause nothing but happiness for two people who love each other. If that threatens territorial security, then the problem isn't with our marriage. As the cavalry detachment departed, Samuel found himself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. His sister Elizabeth, who had remained silent during the confrontation, approached with tears in her eyes. Samuel, she said, embracing him tightly, I don't understand what you're doing, but I can see that it makes you happy. That's enough for me. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of preparations. Father Santos agreed to perform a wedding ceremony that would incorporate elements of both Catholic and Apache traditions. Mrs. Rodriguez began planning a wedding feast that would accommodate both cultures. And Chief Standing Bear worked with Samuel to finalize the details of the horse transfer that had started this entire adventure. As the sun reached its zenith, Samuel and Ayana stood before their families and friends in a ceremony that was unlike anything the New Mexico territory had ever seen. Father Santos spoke of love transcending cultural boundaries, while Chief Standing Bear offered blessings in the Apache language that asked the spirits to guide the new couple through the challenges ahead. When Samuel placed Mrs. Rodriguez's husband's ring on Ayana's finger, he felt as if he were not just marrying a woman, but embracing a new understanding of what it meant to be human in a diverse and complicated world. Do you, Samuel Harrison, take this woman to be your wife, to love and cherish her through all the challenges that may come? Father Santos asked. I do, Samuel said, his voice strong and clear. And do you, Ayana, daughter of Chief Standing Bear, take this man to be your husband, to stand beside him as his partner in all things? I do, Ayana replied, her voice filled with joy and determination. As they kissed to seal their union, Samuel heard cheers from the crowd that had gathered to witness this historic moment. But more than the celebration, he felt a sense of completion that he had thought was lost forever. The story of Samuel Harrison's 1,000-horse proposal would become legend in the American West, told and retold around campfires and in saloons for generations. Some versions emphasize the romance, others the cultural significance, and still others the sheer audacity of the gesture. But for Samuel and Ayana, the true story was much simpler. It was the story of two people who had been brave enough to risk everything for love, and who had discovered that the greatest treasures in life cannot be counted in horses or dollars, but only in the depth of connection between two hearts that have recognized each other across all the boundaries that divide the world. As the sun set on their wedding day, Samuel and Ayanna stood together on the porch of the house they would now share, watching their combined herds grazing peacefully in the distance. The 1,000 horses Samuel had given to Chief Standing Bear were already being integrated into Apache life, providing transportation, breeding stock, and the foundation for a more prosperous future for the tribe. "Do you regret it?" Ayanna asked softly, leaning against Samuel's shoulder. "Giving up so much for one night with a stranger?" Samuel smiled and pulled her closer. "I didn't give up anything, Ayanna. I invested everything in the most important acquisition of my life." "And what was that?" "A future worth living," Samuel replied, kissing the top of her head as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "A future worth living."